So for the first question, we're just adding. We're adding the two functions together. We're taking f of x plus g of x. So I'm taking the 2x squared plus 1, and I'm adding to that my g of x function, which is 3x minus 7. And we combine our like terms. We don't have to do any distributing because it's adding. And the only two terms that we have that are like terms are the 1 and the negative 7. So when we add them, our function becomes 2x squared plus 3x minus 6. All right, raise your hand if you had that for the first question. Good. Now for the second part, it says, what is f minus g of 5? Which means f of 5 minus g of 5. So I'm going to put a 5 in my f function and a 5 in my g function. So that would be 2 times 5 squared plus 1. I'm going to just box that up. That's one number. We're subtracting from that 3 times 5 minus 7. So 5 squared is 25, 50, so 51 minus 15 minus 7 is 8. And that would be 43.
I said on question 2 you get 6. You said yeah. I don't know what I'm doing.
So you do plug in the 5. The first one will give you 51.
That makes no sense. Where do you see 51? 5 times 5 is 25.
5 times 5 is 25 times 2 plus 1. 5 squared is 25.
I thought the parentheses was there just for the squared.
No.
So I wouldn't do 25 plus 2?
You do 25 times 2. There's no sign in between those. So you get 50.
There's the parentheses. I thought that was for the squared.
The parentheses means that the number in the parentheses is squared. That's where you get the 25.
So 3 is also being multiplied by 5?
Yes. The parenthesis just means you're plugging it in. If there's no sign between the numbers, then you're multiplying.
So if it was just 5 squared without the parentheses, I would be adding 25 plus 2? You always put into the calculator. What are you?
I don't understand this conversation.
Everyone's always like, you put in the parentheses into a calculator for the squared.
No,
Because you're...
if you put this in the calculator,
No, I mean parentheses 5 and then squared. You have to do that each time.
yeah, you'll get 25, and then you still need to multiply it by 2 because the 2 is in front.
So the parentheses is for the squared. If I just did 5 squared, would it also be 25?
Yes. The parenthesis just means you're plugging it in, so it's clear to you what you're plugging in.
So I could just do 5 squared without the parentheses and still get the same answer.
If you remember to multiply it by 2 after you square it.
Because that's what the parentheses are for.
Even though this is a really great conversation, we need to move forward. All right, so now did everyone have that graph? Did everyone pick up the graph? So just so you'll kind of know, it is going to take a little bit of space because we're going with that one graph. We have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. So you might want to have at least 3/4 of a page or go to a clean page. But go ahead and copy down example 4, consider the graph, glue that down, and copy down parts A, B, C, and D, and then we will work through it.
So 51 minus 8 is
43.
43? Thank you. That's so crazy. Okay, I see what I did. What the heck?
So we're on example 4, and you need to glue down the graph, and then write down A, B, C, and D. Yep.
My pencil's not penciling.
And then after you glue that down, because we're going from A all the way to P, go ahead and copy down A, B, C, and D. Now, A, B, C, and D just have a single number, so you don't need to skip a line or anything. Homework 6 is due today. You could turn it in today or tomorrow for full credit.
And this is supposed to help us with number 12. Number 12 has a lot of questions.
Yep, it's a lot of questions looking at a single graph. So when there's a number inside of parentheses, that is your X value. So what A, B, C, and D are asking you, part A is saying, what is Y? I'm going to write it as a question. So what this is saying is, what is Y when X equals, and for part A is X equals 0. Part B is saying, what is Y when X is negative 6? Part C is saying, what is Y when X is positive 6? Part D is asking, what is Y when X is positive 11? So I want you to take a guess. I want you to do A, B, C, and D, looking at the graph. I want you to find X equals 0 on the graph. You can either look at the graph glued down, or you can look at the screen. It's the same graph. And tell me, what are the Y values? And that's the only thing we're going down, so I'm going to, well, actually, I'll leave it out for this period. Leave it out for now. Collect the fifth. So when I'm looking at the graph, right here, X equals 0. What is my Y value? 3. Good. So that's the answer to part A. Part B, X is negative 6. So this is X is negative 6. What is Y? Negative 3. For part C, X is positive 6. So Y would be 0. Good. And then part D, X is 11. And what is Y? 1. Who had all 4 right? Good. Question.
Would you just need to write the number?
Just write the number.
That's it, the order pairs.
Just the number. Yep. All right, so now let's look at E, F, G, and H. Go ahead and copy those down, and then we'll talk about those in relation to that graph. So E and F are not asking you what the Y value is. It's just asking, is the Y value positive or negative? So it's not like A, B, and C where they want the specific number. We just want to know, is it a positive or negative Y value? So when X equals 3, so X equals 3 is right here. Be about right here, right in between. Is Y positive or negative at that point where I have my pointer? Positive, so that's a positive. It's a positive, so I'm just going to write positive or circle positive. And when X is negative 4, let me zoom in a little bit. That's about here. Is Y positive or negative? It's below the x-axis, so that means it is negative. Good. And in homework 7, you have a graph, and you have to answer all types of questions about a graph. So that's what we're kind of practicing today. All right, domain. Remember, domain is left to right. So the furthest this graph will go to the left is right here. What is X at that point? -6, and it's a closed circle, so we're going to give it a bracket. Everything on this graph is closed. There's no open points anywhere on the graph. And then furthest to the right this graph goes is right there. What does X equal? X. What is X? 11. So your domain is -6 to +11 because you read it left to right. Now for your range, that's asking the lowest point. So the lowest this graph goes is right here. And the highest it goes is here. So we want to know on the y-axis, what is this number and what is this number? So the lowest it goes, y, would be -3. And the highest it reaches is here, which is +4. So our range is -3 to +4 with brackets. That's the lowest to the top. And that's how you're going to read domain and range.
Can you go over again? How is F -4 negative?
Okay, so I'm going to put a point at -4. So -4 would be about here. So where I put that yellow dot is Y positive or negative, the Y value. So the Y value at that point where I put that yellow dot is negative. So that's why it's negative. And then the other one was what? F of 3. I'm going to put a green dot there. So that would be right here, approximately. Is Y positive or negative? Not X, but is the Y value of that green dot positive or negative? It's positive.
Why are you not putting it on the x-axis?
Because it's the function, and the function is the blue graph.
Oh, so you have to place it on the graph.
Yes, because that's the function. All right. So next for I, J, K, and L. Go ahead and copy that down. All right, two of these questions is asking the same thing. Does anybody want to take a guess? Which two questions are asking the same thing?
First and second.
K and not L, I. These two questions are asking the exact same thing. Okay, so for part I is saying for what values of X is Y 0? That's the definition of an x-intercept. An x-intercept is the X value when Y equals 0. So that's why I and K are asking the same question, just in a different way. Yes.
So you read the same question like I said, what is X when other bases, whatever?
When Y is 0. Yep. For what values of X is Y equal to 0? So that's asking that's the same thing as asking, it's the same thing as asking what the x-intercepts are. So the only difference is that for part I, I'm not going to write my answer as an ordered pair. Now, if you did write them as ordered pairs for both, I would not mark it wrong. But technically for part I, it just wants the X values. So that would be these 3 points where I put my little red dots. And that would be at -3, +6, and 10. But for part K, I'm going to write them as ordered pairs. Anytime I ask you for an intercept, it needs to be written as an ordered pair. Now for part J is saying for what values of X is Y positive. So I'm going to trace the graph in yellow. This part of the graph is above the x-axis, just those little pieces. Those small, like it's an interval. So for part J, and I'm going to write it below because I don't have a lot of space. It's the interval. For what interval of X is Y positive? So for what interval of X is Y positive? So Y is positive when X is between -3 to 6, and then it's positive again when X hits 10, and then the function ends at 11. And I want you to notice that there are no brackets. The only time we're going to use a bracket is when we're talking about domain. So again, let me zoom in to the graph, and then I'll zoom back out again. So this function is positive starting right here when x is -3. And it stays positive all the way until we get to here where x is 6. But then it becomes negative for a short amount of time. And then it's positive again here at the 10. And the function ends at 11. So the interval where x is positive, the intervals of x where y is positive is between -3 and +6, and also between 10 and 11. So that would be your answer for J.
Why are there no brackets?
So we only use brackets when we are talking about domain or range. And we also, and another reason why we don't use brackets, let's look at the graph again, is because when x equals -3, y is 0. It's not positive or negative. At -3, y is 0. It's positive when we're greater than 3, not equal to -3. So it's not positive at these points, which is another reason why we don't use brackets. It's positive between these points. So when we write it that way, it's the same as saying that x is positive. I'm going to write it the old-fashioned way. This is the old-fashioned way. It's not positive at these numbers. It's positive between these numbers, which is why we don't use a bracket.
It's only positive between those numbers.
Between both pairs of numbers. Yes. Union.
So it's like comparing the two.
It's not comparing. It's just saying that it's positive between -3 and 6. Like an and, right? In between 2 and 11. I mean 10 and 11. Sorry, not 2 and 11.
You sound stressed.
All right, question L. The y-intercept written as an ordered pair. The y-intercept would be what? Where does this graph cross through the y-axis? Written as an ordered pair. 0, 3, good. All right. And now we're at the home stretch. We got 4 more questions and we are done. And again, you don't have to write it this way. I was just trying to clarify for those that may be a little confused. I was just writing it this way. This is optional. And actually, this is not how we would write it in PreCal. This is how you would write it. As an interval and interval notation. That is how it would be written.
So the y-intercept is 03 because it's the only part of the
So
function
this,
that is the y-intercept.
right. It's the only part of the function that crosses the
Makes
y-axis.
sense.
All right, last 4 pieces. Go ahead and copy it down. And then we'll talk through that and we are done. Go ahead and copy down M, N, O, and P. Okay, so we only have about 10 minutes, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish this out. So if you drew a horizontal line at y equals 1/2, how many times would it cross through the graph? So I'm gonna just draw that line in. So y equals 1/2 would be, it's a little crooked, but let me try again. All right, how many times does that red line cross through the blue function? 3 times. It actually intersects it 3 times. And if you draw a vertical line, because y equals is a horizontal, that's horizontal. X equals is vertical. A vertical line at x equals 5 would be about here. How many times does that green line cross through the graph? Once, good. So the answer to part M is 3, and the answer to part N is 1. For part O is saying, for what values of x is y equal to 3? So y equal 3. And you can actually also draw a horizontal line, if that's helpful. But if I draw a horizontal line at y equals 3, which would be right there. Let me do it in yellow. Okay, do we see here, if I zoom in, that at what x values, so what are the x values of where it intersects? So it intersects here and here. And that would be at x equals 0 and x equals 4. So the answer would be 0 and 4. X equals 0 and x equals 4. 0, oops, and 4. That's my x values. And then lastly, for what values of x does y equal -2? So y equals -2. I'm going to draw it in blue. So right here. That's y equals -2. So here and here. And that would be at -5 and 8. All right.